we have Dan Johnson here from the South Dakota Department of Revenue, and he is going to share a little bit of sales tax basics for small business owners and specialty crop producers in South Dakota. He's going to go over some of the basics of filing sales tax and some specifics to specialty crop production. This is really great information that can give you a good starting point when learning about sales tax for your business. However, if you have more specific questions to your operation, you can always contact the Department of Revenue for specific advice, and Dan will share some of that contact information.
Hi, I'm Dan Johnson, South Dakota Department of Revenue. I'm going to go over some basic sales tax stuff, kind of like Morgan described. We're going to go over some of the tax facts and then some of the specialty crop producer information that would be helpful. So I'm going to go and get started with our presentation here. All right, you guys able to see it?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to go over the small business basics. This presentation and materials that accompany it to constitute written advice. Any specific taxpayer under SDCL 1059-27. Here is kind of a basic checklist for a new business. Sole proprietor, proprietorship, LLC, corporation. There's a business name registration that's through the South Dakota State of South Dakota Secretary of State, and then the federal taxes, employee identification number, and sales tax, use tax, and contractors excise tax license. That's through our website at dor.sd.gov. All right, who needs a license? Anybody that sells or rents or leases any kind of tangible personal property, any company that sells any kind of service, any company that engages in realty improvement or contracts, that's going to be your South Dakota excise tax license. Purchases products or services that may be subject to South Dakota use tax. Any business that has a physical presence or nexus, as Department of Revenue calls it, in the state of South Dakota. Here's our types of licenses. We have a sales tax license, contractor's excise tax license, manufacturer's license, a use tax, and our wholesaler. Most people will be using the South Dakota sales tax license. Again, realty improvements, contractors, people that are doing some building, plumbers, electricians, they're going to be using the South Dakota contractor's excise tax license. Okay, currently the South Dakota sales tax rate is 4.2%. It applies to the gross sales of retail, lease, or rental. Construction services are subject to the contractor's excise tax, not South Dakota sales tax. So people need to decide if you're selling stuff, you're doing service work, that's sales tax. Again, realty improvement is contractor excise tax, and I know many probably don't have a contractor's excise tax, but it's good to know for everybody. Gross receipts. So business reports the gross receipts on a monthly or quarterly basis. Gross receipts is total amount of consideration received, including cash, credit, property, services without any deductions for the following: retailer's cost of property of service sold, cost of materials used, labor, services, interest loss, and all costs of transportation to the retailer, all taxes imposed on the retailer, and any other expenses of the retailer. So anyways, basically your gross receipts, anything you sell for that time period. If you file monthly, it's going to be from, let's say, for July 1st, July 1 through July 31st. Any of your gross sales in there will need to be reported on your return. Municipal tax. Municipal tax is anywhere from 1% to 2%. It's generally 2%. So if you're selling inside city limits, you're going to be looking at a 6.2% state and city tax. And if you do multiple different cities, you're going to need to record either Sioux Falls, Brandon, T. Everyone has their own little city tax. It's kind of important to these towns, especially if you go to like a smaller town. So they generate most of their revenue through their city tax. And so if you are going to a smaller town, you need to make sure that it's being reported to that town, just so that they get the correct amount of city tax. Okay, MGRT, it's just an additional tax. Many of you will not have this, but it's maybe good to know: alcoholic beverages, lodging, and eating establishment, and that is 1%. Tourism tax, that will apply to some of you. Tourism tax is 1.5%, and that applies to the gross receipts, hotels, a place of lodging, campgrounds, motor vehicle rentals, recreational services, spectator events. Again, that is where you guys are going to come in, generally will probably come into play. So if you guys are going to a weekend deal where they have a gathering outside of farmers markets are not subject to tourism tax. But if you're going to a special event, a fair or a weekend deal, selling your produce, again, not on a farmer's market, it would be subject to the 1.5%. The state fair is a good example of that. Okay, South Dakota on our website at dor.sd.gov, we have a sales tax address lookup. If you're unsure of, let's say you go to a place that is maybe inside or outside city limits. If it is inside city limits, you need to collect the city tax, but you can type in the address of the location you're going and it should pull up if it's subject to city limits or just the state rate of 4.2%. So that's very helpful if you have any questions. Use tax. Use tax mirrors our sales tax, and use tax is going to be due on products that are bought without tax. Let's say you buy something online and they ship it to you, and the license or the whoever you bought it from was not licensed. They might not charge you sales tax. So when it comes into the state, you need to pay the use tax on it. The same rate applies as sales tax. So I don't know where this is exactly may apply to you guys, but it's good information. The products purchased is exempt from sales, also exempt from use tax. Later on, we will be going over some possible exemptions for some small businesses, but we'll get into that a little bit later. And then big thing to know is only use tax or sales tax is due. So if sales tax is paid, no use tax is paid. If no sales tax is paid, then use tax would be due. Okay, situations state sales tax may not have been paid and use tax is due. Here's a couple of examples. I kind of went over one of them. Again, items purchased out of state, vendor or mail order companies. Items taken from inventory from your business or personal use. Items purchased over the internet. Purchase of promotional items. Let's see, I think probably the biggest thing would be, the items purchased over the internet. I know that's kind of gets a lot of businesses. All right, exemptions. 3 reasons a sale may be exempt from sales and use tax. Products or services especially exempt. South Dakota does not have an income tax, and so South Dakota gets a lot of their revenue from sales tax. And so I know from our department, everything is subject to sales tax unless it's exempt. And so we do have some exemptions that we will go over later. A purchaser is exempt. Again, that's going to be city municipalities, schools, private education. Some of those are going to be the group that's going to be exempt. Okay, if you do not receive a properly completed exemption certificate, please collect sales tax. The exemption certificate exempts the retailer and puts the sales tax or use tax on the purchaser. And so make sure you have a properly completed exemption certificate. Here would be a streamlined sales and use tax exemption certificate. You may get one of these if, let's say, someone's buying something to resale, or you may be able to use it It's on our website, dor.sd.gov, and it's going to be Form 2040. And you can fill this out if you need to purchase some stuff exempt or that would qualify for an exemption. Okay, examples of exemption products. Here is a list. Agricultural products. We're going to get more into that. We actually, the Department of Revenue has a tax fax for agricultural products. I would recommend, if you think you have something that would qualify, to go to our tax fax and read that. That is on our website. I'm going to go over some of it later on in the presentation. But if you think it is, that'd be a good way to start. Educational services, food stamps, WICs, forestry services, healthcare, livestock. Again, livestock is going to be some stuff that's been exempt through the legislator, and they're in the South Dakota law. Motor fuel, motor vehicles, prescription drugs, postal services, travel agent services, trucking, and water. Again, water is anything for domestic use is going to be tax exempt. Anytime you buy in a gallon or 5 gallon, it is subject to sales tax. And so water is exempt for domestic use. Okay, here's some exempt entities included. Again, governments, including South Dakota public schools. I don't know if you guys would sell to some of the public schools, but if they would purchase it, they would be giving you an exemption certificate. Municipalities, volunteer fire departments, tribal government, nonprofit, hospitals, religious educational institutes, and they must be registered with the South Dakota Department of Revenue for the exemptions. I'm going to go ahead and skip the alcohol licenses. This just kind of goes over some businesses that would, if they sell alcohol, what they need to do. They need to have a separate license. And so exempt transactions, sale for resale, drop shipments out of state. So if you go to Minnesota, Iowa, and you sell, you would need to record those in your gross receipts, but you do not need to collect tax. If you are shipping out, or if you do go to sale in Minnesota, I would recommend checking with Minnesota, Iowa, whatever state you're selling in, to see what their sales tax are. Agriculture, again, that's going to be, applies to some of us, and then certain repair parts. I'll get into that a little bit later. And then, okay, record keeping requirements. Any business subject to sales or use tax or contract or excise tax in the state must keep records for at least 3 years. So going over, there's a lot of different ways of payment, but gross sales is anything that you collect during that time period. Cash, credit card, Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, any invoices that you do for your business, you need to keep and be able to identify how you collected that money. Gross receipts examples are sales and billing invoices, a general ledger, cash register, bank deposits, contracts, any of that stuff that you generate your sales, you're going to need to keep that. Deductions, again, that's going to be resales, proof of exemption. So if you do sell to a school and they give an exemption certificate, you need to keep the exemption on file. Bad debts, use tax, purchase, would that be for purchase invoices, check registers, fixed asset schedule, inventory withdrawals. So anything on Venmo, any of those where you collect payment, even if you kind of trade work, you need to keep a record of how you got paid and then how you're recording that. If you ever get a review from one of the agents for the Department of Revenue, they're going to come in and say, hey, I see that you recorded $2,500 in sales in the month of May. Can I see your invoices? And then how did you come up with this number? And so if you got multiple different ways, Cash App, Venmo, check register or deposits, you can say, hey, I got this number from these three, and this is my gross sales, just to make it easy. All right, I'm going to go over 10 most common errors. Underreporting of sales and use tax, excise tax due to poor record keeping. Again, better records you keep, the easier it is for you and for the Department of Revenue. Just trying to, whatever system you come up with, just trying to be consistent, and that will help make sure that you are collecting and remitting the right amount of sales tax. Not remitting use tax on goods, again, buying from out of state. I don't know if that would apply all the time, but if you do purchase something for your business and it doesn't have sales tax, then you need to pay the use tax. Remitting a use tax on items taken from inventory. A lot of businesses are able to buy in bulk, and they have an inventory, and they take it out of their inventory and they need to pay use tax on it because the original purchase was not paid with tax. Again, for inventory for business use or personal use. Not remitting use or excise tax on owned and furnished materials. That's going to apply to South Dakota contractors. I don't know if that's totally going to apply to this group, but I'll go over that quickly. If a contractor is going to go replace a house for an individual, and the individual has shingles they bought, and they provide the contractor with the materials, that is what owner furnished materials are. Not remitting use and materials stored in the state, taken out of the state for construction projects. Again, that's going to be to kind of South Dakota contractors excise tax. Exempt sales to taxable customers such as churches and clinics. Not having a valid exemption certificate on file. Again, you need to make sure that you have all those exemption certificates. And MGRT, again, that's going to be the alcohol, hotels, booze. I know a lot of companies do miss, or businesses do miss that, but I don't know. All right, here's a few ways. In fact, before I move on, I want to go over the South Dakota tax facts that we have on our website. Kind of goes over the taxable agriculture products. Kind of goes over the South Dakota tax rates. And one of the things that I would like to point out, it talks about, on the fourth page, there's a definition of agricultural land. And the big thing there is, in order for purchases to be purchased exempt, it needs to be defined as agricultural land. And one of the two biggest things that I could kind of point out is any annual gross income of at least $2,500 a year derived from the pursuit of agricultural from the land, that would qualify you for agriculture land. And then the area needs to be, or the land has to be at least 20 acres to be considered ag land. So if some of these areas are 2 to 3 acres, they would not qualify for ag land. And so therefore anything purchased for growing would be subject to South Dakota sales tax. So you would just purchase what you need, pay sales tax on it, and then when you go to sell it, you would sell it, and then you would collect sales tax from whoever purchases it from you, and then the sales tax that you collected, you will remit to the state. So if you got any questions, if you're able to purchase stuff for exempt, I would go ahead and take a look at that to see if you meet the qualifications. Like fertilizer, the big thing is, purchasing fertilizer. If you do meet the exempt, ag land exemption, if you're going to purchase fertilizer, it has to be purchased in like 500 pounds of bulk in a single sale. So if you're purchasing, 50, 60 pounds of fertilizer, it would not be exempt. And Then, the next biggest thing would be seeds. If you're purchasing seeds, and it has to be in a 25 pounds of bulk in a single sale for that to be exempt. Again, that is if you meet with the agriculture land, according to South Dakota CL Codified Law 10-6-112. That's the law that kind of defines the agriculture land. So there is exempt livestock and animal related products. There's a list of animals that would be exempt animals that would be subject to sales tax: cattle, buffalo, sheep, goats, swine, horses, pheasants, partridges, quail, poultry, ostriches, emus. And I know one of the things that people would be interested in is bedding. Bedding for animals are exempt. They only include straw, corn, and bean straw. So those would be the ones that would be exempt. I know wood chips do not fall into that, and so purchasing wood chips for bedding is actually subject to sales tax. But I would encourage, you got any questions, go to our website, dor.sd.gov, and click on the agricultural products and read through that to give a pretty good understanding. A couple of the things that I'd like to go over as well that may be helpful. Okay, so like having a FEIN versus a filing with your Social Security number, that's the same according to South Dakota Department of Revenue. It doesn't matter. It's going to be the same filing with your sales tax. Having utilizing the square reports, any of the reports for like a square sale, any reports that you can gather, that's going to help you show your gross sales, and that's what you're going to pay your taxes off of, would be your gross sales. Square fees, any fees that you charge. Let's say you sell something for $20 and you do either a 3% or a $3 surcharge for that. That is actually going to be subject to sales tax as well. And so any fees included on your sale or on your invoice is subject to South Dakota sales tax. I'm going to go over accrual and accounting basis. Most people are on cash accounting, and accrual accounting is when you send out the invoice. Let's say you send out an invoice for July 10th, you would pay taxes in July for that invoice. Cash accounting is when you receive the money. So if you sent out the invoice for July 10th, but you didn't get paid until August 10th, you would pay sales tax on the month of August. Again, most companies are, retail companies are cash accounting. Some of the bigger ones do accrual accounting, but most retail stores are cash accounting. And you can, if a person wanted to switch, you can. You just got to notify the Department of Revenue on how you're collecting the tax. But again, I think most are using the cash accounting. All right. Picking apples at like an orchard. So if you have an orchard and you have your customers come in and pick apples, when they come and pick apples, it is subject to South Dakota sales tax and municipal tax if you are inside city limits. I don't know if that applies. I think most will probably be outside city limits. So you're only looking at the 4.2. However, if you have a weekend event where you have a bouncy house and other people come and it's more of a spectator event, that is when you need to charge the South Dakota tourism tax of 1.5%. Strawberries, if you're picking, you got a strawberry patch and people come out and pick it, they pick up an ice cream bucket full of strawberries, you weigh them and you sell that. That's going to be subject to the state rate, 4.2. And if it's inside city limits, again, the municipal tax, but no tourism tax. So again, the biggest thing is that like the tourism tax goes to a spectator event. If you go somewhere that's kind of drawing in people, a weekend deal, that's where you need to charge sales tax. Again, farmers market are not subject to tourism tax. I know that's kind of different to think about because that definitely is a spectator event, but that was able to get passed where it's not subject to the tourism tax. Okay. Farmers markets, as we're talking about that. So uh, if you have a farmers market and you're charging individuals for an area, that is subject to sales tax. So it's $50 or $100 a spot for the weekend. That would be subject to sales tax. And then obviously if you're selling stuff at a farmer's market, you would be collecting sales tax on the items that you sold and no tourism tax. Okay. And then nonprofits. Anytime you purchase items, um, you would collect, or anytime if you have a sale, any sales would be subject to sales tax. You would collect and remit South Dakota sales tax just like any other business. Um, Talked about the farmers market subject to tourism. I'm going to go over that. I think I went over that ag land pretty well. Again, if you got any questions, I encourage you to call the Department of Revenue. We have a live chat as well that you can just kind of clarify if you got any questions. Expenses for specialty producers such as fruit and vegetables considered ag. If you meet the ag requirements for the land, then it's considered ag. If it's not, if you do not meet the requirements, then it's just going to be a regular sale where you would purchase your items with sales tax, and when you sell them, you would collect sales tax and remit that to the state of South Dakota. Looking at my notes here, pest management, if you're um, doing some pest management, there is some are exempt for ag use, but again, if you meet the ag land, then it's exempt. If you do not meet the ag land, then it would not be exempt. Okay, irrigation system. Some of you guys may use irrigation to help with your crops. The irrigation system equipment for rates prior to March of 2003, see manual form 209 prior. Irrigation equipment for non-ag use would be subject to the state plus city tax. So if you're buying an irrigation system in a city and it would be subject to sales tax if it's not used for ag use. For instance, Christmas trees, golf courses, they all pay sales tax on their irrigation system. And again, going back to the ag land, if you meet the requirements for that, again, 25 acres, then that would be exempt. Some of the services, if it is ag land and the repair of it, repair service for irrigation equipment that is installed is subject to contractor excise tax. So if you meet the requirement and you hire someone come in to install the irrigation system, that's going to be subject to this contractor's excise tax of 2% and not the sales tax. Companies either charge sales tax or contractor's excise tax. You can't charge both. So the repair of service of an irrigation equipment, if the original is exempt, then any repairs to it would be exempt as well. So if it did not meet the requirement and was subject to sales tax and they come out and they repair it, then it would be subject to sales tax. Okay, bees are considered livestock and can be purchased without tax for the production of honey. This includes purchase of queen bees. Food purchases for the bees, such as sugar, is exempt. So if there's any bee farmers out there, that would be good to know. I touched on the farm animal bedding. Okay. Water is exempt for domestic use. Again, going to that 1 to 5 gallons would be subject to sales tax. Okay, feed supplements, medicine mixed with feed or for feed supplements, either before or after sold to customer is not registered as a remedy, but as a feed supplement, food supplements for livestock are exempt. Okay, just touching on counties, we don't have a county tax. As of right now, I know that is in conversation with the legislator, but right now we just have the state rate of 4.2 and then the city municipal tax of anywhere from 1 to 2%. If you were to sell to the county, they would probably give you an exemption certificate. And if you are doing irrigation and you do have an excise tax, there's no one exempt from South Dakota contractors tax. So if there's no valid exemption certificate for the 2% of the excise tax. All right, that's kind of all I got. Let's go to our contact information. There's our 1-800 number. Our email tags, if you got any questions or if you see something and you want to submit an email to the Department of Revenue, that will go to an agent and we will look at it. That's a good way to reach out. I mentioned our website, dor.sd.gov. We have several offices throughout the state, Rapid, Pierre, Watertown, Sioux Falls. So if you get an opportunity, you want to stop in and talk to a live agent, you can do that as well. And then we also have a chat on our website that you can reach out. If you got a quick question, hey, I purchased this, or someone told me this, or I'm going to a special event. I did not touch on that, I'll touch on that real quick. A lot of times there's a special event. And so if you don't have a normal South Dakota sales tax license and you go to a special event, they will give you an special event form. And so any sales that you have in that time period of the special event, you could record your sales on that. Again, it would be subject to the state rate, municipal rate, and tourism tax as well. And whoever lead or heads up the special event, a lot of times they work with a local agent and they have a form for you. So that's pretty easy. All right, that's all I have. Morgan, is there anything that you think I will need to go over more or need to clarify?
The only thing that I was thinking, can you clarify? So for the land, when you were talking about pest management or um, anything in regards to like what you're using on your crops, the land has to be exempt first for any of those things to be exempt. Was that what the way that I was understanding, or is it all separate?
Nope, that is, yeah, if your land meets the agriculture land requirement for the state of South Dakota, then any of the pesticide purchases would be exempt as well. If it's not, then it's not considered ag land and the pest management would be subject to sales tax. So if you go out and purchase something or you hire somebody in, it would be subject to sales tax because they're performing a service.